Well, thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Nicole. We welcome everyone to our evening sessions. I want you just to sit back. There's no exams tonight. This is kind of just a laid back, kind of just, as Matthew said, just getting some, I believe, some very useful information and hearing kind of a little bit about my background. Let's take a look at our next slide. And not surprisingly, it's the foot and toes. If you looked at my degree, it's DPM, which means I'm a podiatric physician and surgeon. And this is something that has been coming into our podiatric offices, unfortunately, this past year. And if you don't know, these are COVID toes. They don't look too, exciting in this particular shot, perhaps. You see a little bit of redness over some of the extensor surfaces, especially on the left foot. But these can be extremely itchy and painful. And the person who presents with this may not even realize they are positive for the COVID-19 virus. So we don't have a lot of tissue biopsies on these patients. I think you could understand why. Number one, if you don't think you have a problem, you don't usually go to the doctor. And going to the doctor these days is not as easy, unfortunately, as it was just about 6-7 months ago. But this here, what you're looking at are some histological stains with H&E. And if you look carefully, you can see some infiltrates. Over here on the right side, you can see a little of the epidermal ridges. If you've had a little anatomy, these are dermal papilla. And there's an inflammatory response going on in the skin here. So it can affect the fingers as well. And in my field, if I didn't know COVID-19 existed, I probably would have come up with the presumptive diagnosis of what we would call chilblains, also known as pernio. Kind of like almost a frostbite effect, except these people were not exposed to freezing temperatures. However, their small vascular vessels in the digits of their hands and feet act like they were. So it's just, again, one of the peculiar presentations of many that we're seeing with this virus, and probably many more to come. So I guess you thought the title of this was How to Shine During COVID-19, right? So why am I showing you all this? Well, because if you haven't heard of Carol Dweck, you might want to look her up a little bit. She provides some very useful information about your mindset. And as you see here, the two basic types she describes are the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. So for the most purposes, a fixed mindset is static. It feels like it's done what it needs to do. It's not interested in hearing anyone else's ideas. And it's just going to go with what it knows. And it's going to keep doing that forever. The growth mindset, on the other hand, realizes that you don't necessarily know everything, especially when circumstances change. And COVID-19 has changed a lot. So for instance, I was talking to one of our graduate students in our current BMHS program, as Matthew talked about it, our master's in the biological sciences, who's focusing on a health studies track. And she informed me yesterday after class that she is applying for one of our PA programs. And the PA program, using its same application materials, has an expectation of a set number of hours of shadowing. And although the student, did her due diligence, she started out shadowing early this year in preparation. COVID came, and now she's kind of in a quandary because if she needs these true shadowing hours, how do you get them in a COVID environment? And we're going to come back to that thought in a little bit. So you are either on your way towards your graduation. It may be coming up very soon, for instance, this December or next spring, or you're a little bit further along, or maybe you've already received your bachelor's degree and you're kind of thinking, well, how am I going to get to my next destination? And in my focus, it's about getting into a healthcare graduate program. So great job so far. I hope you have achieved the goals you set out. But before we kind of try to help you on your track, we thought it might be somewhat interesting if you wanted to hear how I got here. So if you take a look at some of my milestones, so to speak, on the upper left is the University of Kansas. I'm a Jayhawk for my undergraduate. I got my biology degree there. And then my program of podiatric medicine was eventually incorporated into the Rosalind Franklin University near Chicago, Illinois. And that's where I got my medical degree. And then that building, you're probably not sure what that is on the upper right. That's in Plantation, Florida. It's no longer what it was when I went there. It was Doctors General Hospital. I don't know if you or your family have been in South Florida long enough, but for many years, it was the only DO hospital in Florida. DOs in the past had some difficulties with getting into the hospitals, and some of them actually started their own. And that's where I did my residency program there in Plantation. I then went into private practice, and you can see that I joined all my organizations. The BCPMA is the county version of the Podiatric Medical Association, the state's in the middle, and the national. And I encourage you to always join organizations, guys, whether they are undergraduate like pre-med, pre-soma, what have you, or your graduate ones. It's vital. You've got to be part of it for several reasons. Number one, you'll get great information, okay? Number two, you'll network. Maybe find a mentor, kind of like me. Or number three, you'll basically be given some information on how to apply to programs. So please don't try to do it on your own. And as a person who has kind of had the opportunity to look over thousands and thousands of applicants throughout my professional career, I can tell you we look for that. Your GPA, of course, is a necessary range. No one's questioning that, all right? As well as if there's an entrance exam. But then we look for things that I call intangibles. And one of them is kind of your activity level. Because to me, if you have organizations that you've been part of, then it kind of shows that you're passionate about it. So on this slide, I started practice over 25 years ago. And this here's just a list of the many different kind of foot problems that I have encountered. And there could be very many more. And in this case, it's alphabetical from A to W. So appropriate to South Florida, Nova, things were sailing along. I was doing fantastic. I was doing what I wanted, loving it, having a great time, really, really thinking I was on top of the world. And for about 10 years, it was kind of like this. No, I did not own a boat because I was told, don't ever buy a boat. But I felt like I was on one. And then suddenly out of the blue, the winds changed. Now, although I was part of my organizations, there was a lot of chatter going on that things were going to change in healthcare. And this is more than 20 years ago. This is in the mid to late 1990s. And my nice sailboat was suddenly hitting some very stormy seas. And it rocked my world. Up till then, I was doing great. And I was doing ethically and morally what I was supposed to do. I was taking care of patients. I wasn't overcharging. And so it really hit me. I really took it hard. Why was I starting to struggle as things were changing in the healthcare delivery system? And so I struggled. I kept kind of keeping my practice alive, but not really growing it anymore. And then it dawned on me. My difficulty was because I wasn't educated in the business aspect of healthcare. However fantastic or good my skills were in terms of being a surgeon, I wasn't that good at understanding the business part. Now, I could sign a contract, I knew that, but I didn't know all the other nuances of it. I didn't understand all the policy decisions. And so I decided to get my master's in health service administration. And you can see that degree next to the letters of my name on the title at FIU. And so I did that while working full time. And then the light bulb went off, as it said. And in this case, the light bulb went off was, I suddenly realized, as much as I love practicing medicine, I was having the opportunity to basically get back into a classroom and often, because of my age and experience, lead conversations, basically help to teach my fellow peers. And I loved it. And so I had a very difficult decision to make. I was at my crossroads. I could either probably leave South Florida because the business climate for a solo practitioner, which was my practice, was kind of washing up. And most likely I was going to have to move either out of the state or further away. And I have a lot of family and friends and relatives down here. Or on the other hand, I could use my new education, my new master's and my doctorate, perhaps in a different way. And that's the way I chose. After a long, deliberate decision-making process, I decided to transition into becoming a teacher. And I haven't looked back. Now, I can't say all my decisions have always been perfect, but they have been thought out. And so when I decided to make that transition, I had to decide where I wanted to kind of bring my talents to. And so I could have and did try. I taught at FIU. I taught a little bit at FAU, at Broward College, et cetera. And I also did some adjuncting here at NSU early on. And that's when I fell in love with NSU. It just felt right. And the reason it felt right is, I hope you know our major core values that our president, Hamberry, has discussed many different times, because it is the essence. To me, an organization has to have belief systems, okay? And these belief systems, opportunity, academic excellence, integrity, student-centered, community, innovation, diversity, and scholarship and research just resonated with me. It really struck me right in my core. It just felt right. Well, that's nice. It's great to have, of course, a place that has similar values. However, I was also looking for the location I mentioned. There could have been a location in Georgia or California, but that's not where I wanted to go. So as you can see here, on top is our beautiful campus for those of you who are NSU students. If not, please come visit us. It is gorgeous. And I'm a little jealous that I'm not a marine science at times, because the Oceanographic Center is on the Intercoastal right next to the ocean. Unbelievably beautiful. But that also is important. So I've got 2 pluses so far. I've got my core values, and I've got a beautiful and safe location. And then the students. My experience over the 16 plus years I've been here have been fantastic. On top, of course, is our Shark Pride students. And on bottom, I'm very proud to say in gray is our first graduating class of the Master's in Biology Health Studies program from about a year and a half ago. And we're really proud of these students. And many, if not most of them, have gone on into either the graduate programs or other careers based on our master's program. So very exciting. We're in the, of course, middle of our next year, and we're looking forward to expanding and hopefully welcoming, if possible, and if you're interested, some of you in the future. And then finally, I don't know if you can recognize anybody. That's Dr. Schmidt on your right. That's Dr. Crump next to her. There I am. And then there's Dr. Raja, and so on and so forth, is many of your biology faculty of Nova Southeastern, many of whom teach not just in the undergraduate, but in the graduate and other programs here on the college university campus. So I've got my core values, I've got a beautiful location, and I've got people I consider friends. You know, what more could you want? So let's just take a look for a second. I know Matthew talked about our program being a 1 year, 30 credits, and this is pretty much the layout for it. I don't know if this looks to you very daunting or too easy, but it will challenge you. I want you to know that. 30 graduate credits, to basically mirror the same kind of education you would have in a first-year medical or dental program is going to challenge you. Not so much in the summer, but the fall and in the winter time. There is one change. If you look at the bottom where it says BCOR 5150, I'm sorry, BCOR 5585, we are going to be substituting that course starting this year with a very exciting new kind of interdisciplinary course that is going to be based on problem-based learning that's being done at most medical schools these days. So we're really excited about that. So these are the lists and of general requirements we have to get into our program. I'm not going to tell you that anybody gets in. We have a committee of faculty that looks over and gives every person who applies an opportunity, a chance. But we also do look critically at that application. And when we do some Q&A, I can give you some hints of what we look at. But these are the basic criteria we're looking for. You do have to have some reasonable abilities, because we don't want you to waste your time and your money if you struggled severely in as an undergraduate. We're not a kind of program that's going to be able to kind of teach you the basics. We're hoping that very quickly you'll catch on and, so to speak, start flying, because that is really what we're trying to do for you. We want you to get into the program professionally after ours that you really desire. So just to kind of beat the drum here a little bit. So what would help you choose to come here versus other programs? Well, number one, we're similar to other programs that have established. We're not the first kids on the block to do a one-year master's in biology. However, we are one of the few that does it in 1 year. Many other programs spread out over 2 years. And time is important to you. We want you to accomplish this goal as efficiently as you can. And like them, we are accredited. Our curriculum seems to be preparing from what we're hearing from our graduates, those students for their first year in their professional programs. But perhaps it's really our differences that matter the most. And number one, it's the faculty. I think we're unique in that we have both clinical and PhD non-clinical experts who kind of were selected for this program specifically because many of us have won teaching awards, and many of us, especially myself, just love to be a mentor. And I think that's unique. We're not here just to get you in and then kind of forget about you. We're going to try our best to help you succeed. So getting back to what Matt said when we started, so how will you shine when applying to programs during COVID and beyond? Well, just a couple thoughts and then we'll open up for your questions. Number one, in some ways, nothing's really changed. If you still have the desire to get into a professional program, there are still some specific attributes that you need to acquire. So what do my colleagues look for? Number one, we look for kind of professionalism already. We're looking for that student who takes responsibility for their learning. And maybe they are just looking for a fresh start, or things didn't quite work out for them as an undergraduate, okay? But they're ready, and they realize this is a very important year if they get into our program. And that's one thing I want you to kind of consider. But if for those of you who aren't in that position yet, this actually professionalism, you're planning for your future should have started, if not in high school, in your freshman, sophomore years. It's never too early to start planning. And I've already mentioned one way you do that is join organizations. Show your passion. Although not easy, the second thing that rhymes with passion is compassion. One of the things I know our graduate programs here at NSU look for is your empathy. They want to see that you truly kind of love humanity and you really do want to be that person that will go out of their way to help solve a patient's problem. They're not looking for people looking for the easy way. So wherever you can, volunteer your services, whatever you can volunteer now, especially in this time, I highly encourage you to do it. You'll get great satisfaction from doing it, and people will take notice of it. So we're kind of back to that crossroads. I shared my story with you a little bit, that I was kind of going down a road. I was in my sailboat, sailing along. Life was great. And then it wasn't COVID-19, but a change in the healthcare delivery system that kind of rocked my boat. In my case, it changed my direction. And although I've kept up my skill sets, my focus is not really on patients so much, but on students. Kind of giving them the mentorship, honestly, I wish I had been given during my developmental years. So the question is, what's next for you now? And I thank you for listening to me, and I'll be happy to try to answer your questions. Happy feet.
Nicole, do you want to open up some of the questions here?
So we received one question from Irene asking if this is for students that are taking a gap year. So what would you say to that, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. When we've been thinking, when I say we, I mean my fellow faculty, this is not a one-person job. This requires administration. Having a program takes tremendous effort. So the we is collective. But when we we're in the planning stage, we're writing hundreds of letters of recommendation to other what you would call gap year programs. And when we looked at those gap years and talked to students programs who went to them, it's a mixed bag. Some were okay with it in achieving the goals, many were not. And we've kind of felt that we had everything in place to basically have our own program. And when you look at the different major associations for medical students, dental students, DO students, et cetera, taking a gap year, we were shocked a couple years ago to find was more common than going directly into a program out of undergrad. That really shocked us. We were surprised. This is about 4 years ago during our planning. It was over 57% of students were now doing a gap year. So to answer your question, Irene, absolutely. That's what this is an opportunity for. Now you can work, and there's nothing wrong with working. But to me, again, how you shine, you've got to make yourself more competitive. What's going to be different about you besides working? Okay. So one thing that will be different is getting a higher degree. If you can get a master's degree, okay, at the level we are teaching it, not only will you gain the confidence and the knowledge you will need to be successful and that you will hopefully get into a professional program, but it will make you more competitive than the undergrads. It's simple as that. A master's will trump a bachelor's degree. So yes, you definitely want to consider that. Anyone else have a?
Sorry, we just got another question asking if students should talk about COVID in their applications at all, or if it should be omitted.
No, if it's impacting you in some way, which it obviously is, I think you should consider, you shouldn't shy away from mentioning it. However, it would not be an essay on COVID. So kind of the way I approach this lecture tonight, maybe just a taste, a sampling, and how you're persevering perhaps despite it. So maybe your family members all came down with it and you were sick, or at least positive, but you still got through your education. It's the old lemonade from lemons. Try to put it in a positive slant if you can, rather than kind of being, I guess, that kind of depressing person who it's horrible, it's terrible, the world's coming apart. So I do encourage you, if you feel it's useful to you, yeah, you can use it, but use it, judiciously. Use it and put up, as best you can, a positive spin on it.
Well, just also jump into, Mark, one of the things, we've taken a look at, and part of the reason why this program has been so successful is a lot of students in here, a lot of you think, I'm going to get into the medical or dental school right off the bat, right, coming out of undergraduate. And a lot of students don't realize that it's like almost 60% of the students nationwide will actually enroll into some sort of gap year program before they enter into a medical school, dental, BA program. So it's important that you look at this as I may not get in the first time around. I need to build up my resume, my academic history on here. and build a mentorship with some faculty in a program. And this is one of the reasons why it's a great opportunity for students.
Okay, I see another student has a question about basically based on being young and I'm assuming not experienced in terms of being in a healthcare environment, working environment, and applying to graduate school. Well, one of the things you want to look at is to pay close attention to the application and talk to your admissions people. So if you're trying to get into a program that has an expectation that you've been experienced in some fashion, the healthcare world, either through your volunteer work or shadowing or actually working there, then you need to take that into account. So you might, depending on what you're graduating to, and even in all honesty, I think it's essential that you actually do spend some time immersed in it. It makes sense. If I was to open up a restaurant, and I know food, but I've never run a restaurant, eaten in restaurants. I think it would make sense if I did a little research and maybe spend time, with the owner, even with the dishwasher, the cook, what have you. Get a little experience from it. See what it's really like from the inside view. And I would encourage you to do that. Now, the difficulty, of course, is with COVID-19, there's so many restrictions in healthcare, and you have to kind of think, and I hate to say it because it's trite, but outside, right, the box. So I'm sure you've already heard it. If there's any way you could shadow remotely, or I think if you could even just do interviews, perhaps, with some healthcare professionals, take the time to do that, okay? And even if you're just looking at videos, I guess like on YouTube, of surgeries, depending on what you want to go into, you want to the best of your abilities to get experienced. You can also kind of be a little bit innovative. If you're going in, say, for a checkup with yourself, why not take the time to talk to the personnel as well as that provider? What's it like to be here? And you know what? I know it's a little bit funny sometimes to ask, but you can perhaps ask, is there any way I could kind of come here a few hours a day, a few hours a week, and kind of just watch what you do? So you got to kind of figure out a way to get things done, even when it's not easy to do so. So that was a good question. Are there any more?
Yes, we've got a few lined up. So someone asked, what do you suggest to students whose GPA has suffered due to a class? I'm assuming just like one class. This person specifically struggles with chemistry and it has caused their GPA to drop. So they're asking what you would recommend to students like them who are passionate about medicine and healthcare, but who have maybe a lower GPA.
Well, I mean, a lot of things depend on, what class it was, to be honest with you. Traditionally, and now I'm going back 25 years, it was actually organic chemistry that was always considered as an undergraduate, the course that kept you out of med school. If you didn't get a B or better, you had to think of a different field pretty much. I don't think it's that way so much anymore. I personally don't look at one class as being a make or break. I look at your kind of overall kind of record and kind of, are you trajectorying at least even or going up? Or God forbid, you're more like this, you're playing and, you did great as a freshman, but every year as the challenge got up, you went the other way. That's not good, for you or really for your record. Everything you do kind of follows you, especially in this highly technological world where a lot of things are documented. And you want to be very cautious of just as an aside, your social media, what you're projecting out there. But in terms of the grades, sometimes I wonder with my undergraduates, and again, I apologize, it's like they're beating a dead horse. If you're struggling in a course and you still have an opportunity to either talk to the instructor, possibly get tutoring, or at worst, drop the class, I often find they don't. They just kind of write it out, complaining a lot, and then get a grade they're not happy with. The difficult choice is coming back to what is the class that you feel you didn't do well in? Is it considered essential in terms of your application? Let's say organic chemistry is still considered that way. Then you've got a couple choices. You can retake the course, and that's a good possibility. Or you can go ahead and take other courses that can still demonstrate your ability. We all stub our toe, not to use a foot pun, once in a while. That's not the end of the world. More important is that it's how you recover from that. So yeah, maybe there were circumstances, maybe they weren't beyond your control, and you unfortunately got a blemish on your record. It's like having a scar. It's not the end of the world. But what you don't want to do is getting completely scarred up. And you do want to make sure that you have, going back to that mindset, you want to have the right mindset. You got to have that growth mindset. Another problem, and I know it's not related to this question, I see with my undergraduates are, they come in complaining after an exam, usually the first one I give in a semester, and they're kind of saying, you know, I spent so many hours studying, I don't understand, you know, why it didn't pay off better. And we'll give them some advice. The second exam, the same thing happens. Well, it's kind of like the old saying, if you keep doing something the same way over and over, and you're not seeing any improvement, what that tells you is you've got to change something up. So in that case, probably the way you study the material or the way you focus on it. Worst case scenario, sometimes a field is not for everybody. Sometimes you've got the heart, and I've seen that when I started out, as I mentioned, doing some adjunct work like at the community college. And in that case, I was mainly teaching anatomy courses for pre-nursing. And many of them came in with, you know, wonderful people. You could see they had the heart, but unfortunately, they just did not have what it takes in the mental ability to really showcase that they could learn the material at that even undergraduate level. And that's very sad, because when you see someone that passionate, but at the same time, not having the skill set and the knowledge to kind of get to their goal, there's not a lot you can do for them. So I hope I helped there a little bit.
Going back to that GPA question very quickly, if, like you said, it turns out to be like someone just stubbed their toe metaphorically, and you know, it's just sort of a blemish on the record, is that something that should or can be addressed in like a personal essay when applying to the program and sort of it, or would you not recommend that?
I'd say be very cautious and understand, you know, what we're telling you, you take with a grain of salt. These are only my opinions. This is not necessarily what I'm talking about represent NSU or any other program or the rest of my colleagues. So do realize that, everybody out there. This is just from my experience getting into programs myself and basically being here for 16 plus years, okay? I'd say be cautious with that. There would have to be, look, they're gonna get your transcript. And if things go the way they should, everything else being done okay, you should get an interview. And it may come out at that time. And you want to kind of walk that kind of tightrope carefully. You want to make sure that you're not over spending too much time kind of obsessing about it. And here I'll give you a little hint. Do you know what faculty hates hearing? It's always the other teacher's fault. It wasn't your fault. You were this innocent little lamb taking this class, and this teacher had it out for you. And it just goes on, either verbally or in writing. I'll be honest with you, when you're on a committee, that's not a good thing for us, because it looks like that person is not mature enough to handle situations. So learn to take responsibility. If you feel it is important to say something about it, try to be succinct in it. And again, my little lemonade analogy, try to give it a positive spin. So although I struggled, and despite all my efforts, I did not get the grade I was expecting, I did learn, you know, I learned so much from it. I learned from this somewhat failure how not to fail again. And then you say, and as you'll see in my transcript, the rest of my grades never slacked off again. So that's how I would approach it. But again, be careful with that, because it is a double-edged sword. Maybe you had someone who has severe vision problems and they didn't see that blemish when they're looking at your transcripts. And now you're talking about it, you're kind of pointing it out. So that's what I mean by that. But that's a good question too.
All right, thank you. So we've got quite a few more. I'll try to move on quickly. I was interested, one of the attendees asked this, I was interested in doing shadowing with a healthcare professional, but I have no idea where to start. Do you know who I can go to do this?
Well, if you're one of our undergraduates here and you were in one of our clubs, I would start there, because I'm the pre-med advisor, I'm the pre-soma advisor, I used to be the pre-dental, I'm kind of the co-pre-dental advisor. And so we've kind of had all our clubs initiate some kind of shadowing experience with both the graduate programs here, which is a great reason to come to NSU, as well as the community as well. So I would start there, but I don't know, who this person is, if they're one of our students or not. If you're on the outside, or even if you are one of our students, something you don't always, is use your connections, folks. Trust me, people always know somebody. A friend, a coworker's parent knows somebody, and that is the leverage you need to open the door. If that doesn't work, something a lot of students don't think of is go to the organization. Basically contact, for instance, if you want to be a podiatrist and you notice I have a county organization. Most, but not all professions have a county, state, and national organization. So check out and see if you're in Miami-Dade, is there a Miami-Dade section of it, or Broward County of whatever it is. Contact them. Often they are looking to allow mentorship and or shadowing experiences as well. I would say that in the time of COVID, get yourself tested then. And make sure you're tested regularly and you have that test to show you're negative, because that would be the first thing I would ask if you wanted to come to my practice is, have you been tested? And you're going to say, no, I have no problems. Well, that doesn't mean you couldn't have the virus. And as you well know, it doesn't mean you couldn't spread it to someone else, especially my sick patients. And in my field, we tend to deal with a lot of the elderly. So if you are considering that, it's not always fun to do. I know it's not the most fun test to have a pick stuck up your nose, but in the meantime, it would give you evidence to show people that you're serious. And very importantly, you are concerned about other people's health. Again, that's that professionalism part of it. That was good. Next.
So we have a couple kind of similar questions. One was what year should students apply? And then another was whether you can join the program in their junior year or if they have to graduate first.
Okay, I'll take the second one first. No, our prerequisite is a graduate bachelor's degree. So it's not at this point, it's not a dual admission kind of program that Matthew can talk about. That might be something he wants to talk about with the powers to be. That is something that we could do perhaps and make it a 4-year master's program. But for right now, though, you do have to have a degree, a bachelor's degree. And the other question again, Nicole?
Sorry, what year should students apply?
I'm not sure what you mean. You mean if you're in the undergraduate kind of component of this, you really get all your pieces together your junior year. And another little tidbit of advice, make connections with your faculty and stay in touch, okay? It's very difficult for me to remember a student 3 years later. I had him as a freshman and suddenly 3 years out of the blue, I don't honestly really remember the student. Now they're asking me for a letter of recommendation. It's very difficult because don't you think they've changed now? They're a senior. So at the very least, just drop an email, drop a letter, a phone call, just once in a while. We're not lonely, but if you're thinking of getting a letter, then kind of develop that relationship, that communication, that networking, that mentorship. And then it means something. And I could say, yes, I had them as a freshman, but they've been keeping in touch with me for the last 2 years. And they've been coming into my office occasionally and we talk about healthcare, the good, the bad, the ugly, get the idea of that. So, and specifically answering your question, you want to apply when you're ready, honestly, and when you think you're competitive. And if you think you're on track on a 4-year program, then pretty much by the spring of your junior year, you better be ready. I know Nicole and Matthew's gonna get sick of my cliches. The early bird gets the worm. It's a very competitive world. You're not just going against other undergraduates now. And not just local undergraduates, you're going against the world, folks. And you're going against people with master's degree, depending on what you're applying to, and even doctorates. And that makes it very tough for an undergraduate to compete against that level of sophistication. It can be done, but you want to start early because it shows to me as an admissions committee that you're serious about it. You're a responsible person. You had all your ducks in order, everything lined up, ready to go as soon as that application period began. Versus the application period ends, let's say, October 31st, and you haven't even sent it in yet. Let's say somehow you were able to, by the end of this week, you get everything in. Well, it's all rushed. You probably didn't have anybody proofread your statement, probably missing letters of recommendation. And if you don't know what happens, we have a kind of a virtual drawer, because these are electronic, that incomplete applications go in. We don't bother looking at an applicant until everything is in, because it's a waste of time. And it's not our responsibility to call you up and say, hey, you know, so-and-so, we're missing 2 of your letters. It's your responsibility as an applicant to be serious about it. Because if this is truly the field you want to get into, then you've got to act professional, like you deserve and belong in it. Very good. Go ahead, Nicole.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I think you talked about this a little bit earlier, but if you can reiterate or maybe expand a bit, what do you think would be a good plan for a gap semester?
Well, again, it depends on your abilities. If you feel that, look, my suggestion is look at the first year program of the professional program you're interested in, whether it's medical, dental, pharmacy, optometry, whatever it is, okay? And see if your undergraduate training really prepared you for it. Now you brought up another of my pet peeves, and that is, unfortunately, to me, one of the most important courses, I do happen to teach part of it, is called Anatomy and Physiology. And some professional programs have taken the word required away and just like highly recommended. And sadly, for some students, that word highly recommended means don't bother with it. I don't know why they get that attitude. All I can tell you is, having gone through the training and the certifications and recertifications, it's all about the human body. And number one, you absolutely should take an undergraduate, some kind of undergraduate anatomy and physiology course, whether it's required or not. Come on, you want to go into healthcare, don't you want to know how it works? Because if you wait for the graduate version, it's not just the word graduate, it's exponentially more detailed. And it goes exponentially faster. Along with, by the way, a lot of undergraduates don't realize, it's anywhere from 20 to 30 credits in the first semester of some professional programs, okay? Which is kind of why we have set up our master's program the way we have. We're not going to give you all the credits they would go through, but we're going to give you I would say, the most challenging courses. So that if you get through that with flying colors, and we hope you do, you are so prepared for those courses. For most of our students who've graduated, they're just review classes. Imagine that, going to your first year, say, of medical or dental school, and the courses are very similar to the ones you took with us. And basically, it's like a review now. That takes so much pressure off. You have no idea. Otherwise, you're going to basically look like me at your age, because you'll be in the library all the time, and you don't want that. But as far as the gap year, as I mentioned, more and more, I'm going to guess, if it was 56, probably up to 60% of students now. Because what I just said, undergraduates are having a more challenging time getting into the professional programs because A, they're competing against people with master's degrees. B, the maturity factor, okay? A lot more organizations, especially like the PA programs, they kind of like to see a little bit more seasoned individuals, someone who's actually lived life a little bit so they can kind of relate to the patients a little bit, and also took the time to kind of experience life, not just rush through their undergraduate so fast it can make you blink. And suddenly they find themselves in a graduate program and they're 21 years old. The average age, Matthew, you can check on this, I'm going to guess of a graduate is probably over 25, 26 now entering. Not 20, I was 22 when I did it. I did it the old-fashioned way. But that was many decades ago, and things have changed dramatically. So during this gap year, you have two choices to make. If you feel you have an impeccable undergraduate and it was just monetary, then work. That's fine. You are allowed to work, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you feel that you can improve on your undergraduate to make yourself more competitive, and as you saw from my life's journey, I had a doctorate, but I went back and got a special master's because I didn't have that knowledge. That program, when I left it, I could be running a hospital, but I chose to come and teach because that's my passion. I found my passion. My passion has also been for patient care. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having more than one love, so to speak. But that's what I would do for that student.
Yeah, the average age is 24 and a half, Mark.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, it's not 22 anymore.
So, I mean, I think the big thing is, and Mark touched base on this, and we've talked a little bit, is that, I think students need to take a hard look at where their academic resume is, what they have done outside of there, built up their overall resume, and get an understanding of whether, do they need a gap year? Do they need to beef up their MCAT scores, their DAT, their OAT scores? And some of these gap year programs, like our Masters of Biological Science Health Studies concentration, is a classic example of a program that's designed to help students get prepared for continuing on to a health profession program.
Okay, I see the one about a student, I guess, who's, maybe majoring, I assume when you say the arts, like the performing arts, something like that. I actually had a conversation 20 years ago with Florida State University's medical admissions doctor in charge of it, the dean actually, at a meeting. And I was kind of going, well, I've joined this about the time I started here. I'm full-time biology faculty. Is that still the way you like to see it? And at that time he said, yeah, that's kind of what most people do. But he goes, but I'll tell you this, if I could get a student who did art or music, but also all the science and all the math, that would make them more competitive than the pure biology student. The problem, though, has changed in that the second half. You've got to do all those prerequisites that medical school requires. And it just, to me, it's that match. That almost lines up perfectly with a biology program. It's not saying that if you go to a different major, you couldn't do it. You absolutely can. It just is a little bit more challenging because you've got to take 60% to 70% of what a bio major would take, plus 100% of what your major is. So if you do the arts, it can be seen possibly as an advantage as long as you're competitive in the sciences.
Excellent. A few more questions in our Q&A section. These two are kind of similar. One is, what do you recommend students do when applying to medical school? That's very general, I think. And then a slightly more specific one is, if you reviewed medical school applications, do you think participating in research is more important than volunteering?
Okay, I'm going to just basically use my bias, because if you can ask 10 different faculty, you'll probably get 10 different answers. It really depends. If your research was that active, a role in it. I mean, you are not just, and I'm not trying to put anyone down, just creating test tubes and like cleaning up the Petri dishes, but you have a very active role in it. And it's very rewarding for you and it's very passionate. Then there's no reason not to do the research. But as you heard me say earlier, I know here at NSU and every program I've gone to, more and more they respect that compassion. And by being out in the field, volunteering, especially if you could do it like in a hospital or a medical clinic, whatever, it embeds you in that environment. It gives you real life experience that you usually don't get in let's say, what I call bench research in a closed lab. So ideally, you would do both if that's possible. But how would I weigh it? To me, that showing that you've got a heart, to me, outweighs the research, especially, and don't take this wrong, students, if you're just gaming it, you're only doing some kind of research experience because you think it'll make you look better. Because most good admissions people will find that, either in your essay or should you get the interview. Because they're going to say, well, what was your role with that research? And they'll keep peeling away at you a little bit. Versus if you're truly volunteering, as I'm trying to tell you, because you have a heart and you love it, they're going to have a hard time stopping you, because you're going to say, yeah, I started out there, just wanting to give, planning on 5 hours a week, but I found myself there 10 hours a week. And, and I've had all these great relationships. From that volunteering, you're going to get, you know what's very powerful? Here's another secret. A letter from a patient, not from a professional, but from a patient, just saying they can see you're going to be a great doctor one day. Think how powerful that is. The really most powerful, though, is selfishly a faculty who knows you and you've kept in touch with. I'm not sure what to do. The other question was very general about med school. It just so happens we might be having some future, you can talk to Matthew about it, webinars about stuff like that. It's such a general one that I'm gonna have to kind of hold off on that, if that's okay.
Sure. Let me see. We answered the arts question. I think our next one is whether virtual shadowing is a good way to gain clinical hours during this time.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to that. Hey, you've got to adapt. That's life. And again, if the environment now is discouraging having excessive people congregate, especially on at-risk patients, then you want to respect that at this point in time and kind of stand back and kind of, that's what you could write in your essay, is that although perhaps you were given an opportunity to do in-person shadowing, you decided to do it remotely because you did not want to take the risk of harming anyone in that practice, especially some of their elderly. You see how powerful that can be? You're showing not just compassion, but your sacrifice a little bit versus gimme, 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 gimme. So I would say absolutely, probably, unless the only way, actually, I do a practicum as part of undergraduate teaching here, very uniquely. And what I've been doing is a health literacy project, which I'll be happy to talk about another day with it. But the only student doing in person is working at a dental clinic. And yes, in my practicum, you can work and get academic credit. That's the only reason this student is in that facility. All the other ones are doing it virtually. And I think that's here to stay probably until we get this COVID problem controlled to the point where it's relatively safe for everybody to go back to some kind of in-person experience.
Awesome, thank you. I think this is the last one we have at the moment. Would the admissions committee appreciate if this student volunteered in a different medical area other than what they're applying for?
Of course, what I look for, and again, remember, going back, this is Dr. Jaffe, this is what I look for, okay? I want what you want. And I tell this to my students, I want what you're passionate about. Don't do it because you think it looks good or it's what I personally want, okay? So if you, let's say, are applying to, I guess you're saying like a medical program, but maybe you have the opportunity to go to a nursing home or a physical therapy clinic, I see personally nothing wrong with that. And I can actually say, as long as you've had some experience in a medical practice, it would be a great idea to show that you want to know how the rest of the healthcare professionals work, because we're often referring to each other. I've often had to write for rehab for ankle sprains and fractured feet, stuff like that. So it would be great for, I think, an undergraduate to take the time to actually say shadow a physical therapist or someone else. So yes, to answer the question, as long as your passion and as you write your statement, it shows, there's nothing wrong with doing it in a related area, as long as you're getting good experience.
Awesome, thank you, Mark. I believe we're pretty much out of time. We're like right at 6:59, 7 o'clock mark. So is there anything that you want to say to kind of wrap this up before?
Sure. I first of all, thank Matthew and the rest of you for inviting me to do this. It's been a lot of fun for me. This is what I live for. I really honestly want to be that mentor that I never had. Honestly, I ran into a lot of people who I felt went out their way to make my life a little bit harder than it had to be. And I know for a fact that myself and many of my colleagues are more like the ones that, and it's that difference I mentioned before. We want to basically help you to the best of our abilities. It's not a guarantee. We can't do things for you, but we will put a hand out. We will do whatever we can, we're allowed to do to assist you, whether you're an undergraduate here or graduate students, because your success is truly what makes me shine, so to speak. So don't give up your dreams, people, but be realistic, okay? All right, make sure that it's a good match, your future profession. Final words, don't do something because somebody else wants you to do it. You don't want to be that unhappy professional who's smart enough to do it, but your heart's not into it. We've all experienced them. So try to make sure that you reflect on what you want to do and that you plan early and you use the help that's here. You know, Matthew's got a great team with you, Nicole. People should just ask you. You guys give great advice as well. You have connections to faculty, to programs. You're kind of very wealth of information that the students should take advantage of, to be blunt with you. And that's my last word.
Thanks, Mark. It was really a great presentation. I think the students got a lot out of it, and the questions, the Q&A there kind of reflected how interested and passionate our students were who attended. So I want to thank everybody who participated. We are going to send a follow-up email to students just to say, you know, thank a little bit about our program, you know, any tips and tricks that we have for students that we recommend going forward. You know, we want you to stay in contact with us because we're always happy to talk with students and have a discussion about, you know, applying to graduate school and anything we can kind of help on our end. So if you have questions, feel free to send us an email back. We'll also send a little bit of a survey as well. Certainly don't have to fill it out, but we always want input from the students who are participating in these virtual lecture series. Mark, thank you again. It was awesome.
Thank you. Everyone have a great night and stay well. Stay safe.
Thanks, Mark. Again. You too.
Okay. I'm going to leave, guys.
Hey, thanks again. I appreciate it, Mark. We'll touch base tomorrow over email or over the phone if you're around. So.
Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead. Bye.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to end the session now, but again, if anybody has any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Matt or I, and we'll be sending out follow-up emails, so you can just kind of reply to those as well if you have any specific questions. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.